When I was in preschool, my mom loves to tell this story too. This little girl came up and she says, "Johnny Eckert, I'm going to kiss you." And I said, no, I'm going to be a priest.
And you were in what grade?
I was 3 years old. And
3 years old.
So faith has always been a part of everything.
People often wonder who we are. Why do we dress this way? What do we do all day? Why do we live this kind of life? What does it mean to be a sister, a priest, a Catholic? We want to help you navigate life through faith, to find the truth of God and all His glory, because the truth shall set you free.
Today, I am happy to tell you that this is just part one, because we have such an extraordinary priest, yes, and dear friend, you see, and he has come to us all the way from North Carolina, which, as you already know, is close to my homeland in Tennessee. So we share the Smoky Mountains kind of between us, but we share them. In any case, Father John Eckert is here with us today. And Father, why don't you begin by telling our audience a little bit about how you, your family, your upbringing, how you found your vocation?
Well, thank you, sister. Well, I like to say that I have been Catholic since I was conceived. You know, people like to say, they're a cradle Catholic, but it's just everything, about the family. It's just part of, the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. Apparently, when my parents found out that I was going to be a boy, my grandma pretty much announced that I'd be a priest. So that was always kind of part of the surrounding for a long time. And I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I have wonderful parents. And wonderful siblings as well. Don't leave them out. And thanks be to God, because of those wonderful siblings, I have a wonderful niece and wonderful nephews. And just a phenomenal family. We're really blessed, very close. I'm excited we get to see them right after Christmas this year. And so we've always been close. And I think one of the greatest gifts that my folks gave us, all 4 of us kids, was, I always like to say, they never made us go to Mass. They made us want to go to Mass.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And the only time, to be honest with you, I can remember not going to Mass on a Sunday growing up. Grew up in Peoria, Illinois. And there was one time it snowed so bad we couldn't get to church. And we tried, actually, but it just, somehow or another, it didn't work out. But that's the only time I can remember not going to Mass as a child. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Just in and around the church. Mom volunteered in the school. Dad, at one point, was the finance council chair. Then when that term ran out, he was on the school board, and just, in and around the church all the way. In fact, when we were a lot younger, we started out in Decatur, Illinois. And both sets of grandparents lived walking distance from Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church. And one of the good memories for a lot of us, my grandpa O'Brien, taking us over to the church and counting the O's on the sign at Our Lady of Lourdes. So, just always being around, the school or around the church. I remember Catholic Schools Week when we were still in Decatur. I was only in the 1st grade. I remember this because it was with my 8th grade pal. And, it's like Catholic Schools Week, all the Catholic schools in town came together for a big all-school Mass. And I remember the song being played, "Here I Am, Lord." And just as a 1st grader, just, really thinking about, I'm going to be a priest someday, and Sister Mary Lawrence said this earlier today, that I should tell this story. And I always like to say when I'm on a retreat, I'm like, okay, this is just between us. Don't tell anybody.
You're only speaking it from
exactly. Yeah, it's fine. So everybody who listens to this, keep it quiet. But when I was in preschool, my mom loves to tell this story too. This little girl came up. Her name was Katie Burris. And if she happens to listen to this, how funny would that be? But she comes up and she says, "Johnny Eckert, I'm going to kiss you." And I said, no. I'm going to be a priest.
And you were in what grade?
I was 3 years old. And
3 years old.
So, so it's one of those things, like, just the faith has always been a part of everything. And when I growing up in Peoria, we had a wonderful summer vocations camp for young men discerning the priesthood called Emmaus Days. They started at 7th grade. Somehow or another, I snuck on as a 6th grader. I mean, it was one of those things where, just always was thinking about it. And I served Mass, and it was beautiful. Towards the end of high school, visited...
But let me just pause a minute just to say, because I try to point this out so often to our to our audience the importance of raising your children with the faith.
Absolutely.
Because that gives them the ability to really discern their vocation, which is what Father is referring to, in the fact of they see the beauty of the vocation to marriage and their own family. There's living the faith, their own parents, certainly. And then they see the beauty also of the priesthood for the men and religious life for the women. And I love that when that is a theme in someone's life.
Absolutely.
You said from conception on, you have been Catholic, and Father, that just so resonates in me. And I always pray it will resonate in more and more young people as time goes on, that we will return to this very strong theology of the importance and the value of good, solid families.
Absolutely.
And the faith in the families.
And please do stop me, because it's like this is the area where
you stop me and I stop you. We're in this together.
It's one of those things that's so good, because whenever you stop to reflect on it, sometimes it's easy to forget about those things.
Yes.
It's like it's just part of who you are. But then when you start talking about it, it's just like, man, there's such a treasure trove of things to talk about. I mean, I haven't talked about counting the O's in a couple of years, but, or Katie Burris, like the long-lost 3-year-old, love of my life. No, but, it's just funny.
Katie Burris watches this sometimes.
I really hope so, too. Wouldn't that be great? Like, just out of the pile. Oh, I'd love it so much. But no, and even as a parish priest, I tell families all the time, like, how do the kids learn to go to Mass? By going to Mass.
Yes.
Are they going to make some noise?
Exactly.
Yeah, they are. So what? And I've told the folks in the parish, it's like, look, here's the thing. When kids make noise, especially the really little ones, 2-3 years old, that's what kids do.
Exactly.
They don't have a problem with that. It's when cell phones make noise that you got a problem. When cell phones do what cell phones do, leave them in the car. I mean, unless you're a doctor or a police officer on call, that happens. It can, those things. But why bring your phone in? Leave it in the car, leave it at home. We can be separated for a while. But the kids, and just to see, how do they learn how to genuflect? Just by, muscle memory, so to speak. You go into a church, you genuflect. How do they learn it? Because they've been doing it since they could walk. How do they remember to, bless themselves with holy water? They've been doing it since they could reach. And if you wait until they're old enough to understand, we don't do that with anything else.
No.
The most important of things
they begin eating quite early on.
Exactly. You take them to the doctor
I think we wait till
early
they
on.
understand.
Yeah, and it's just, and I was so blessed to have this handed on to me in such, it's very incarnational. It's just, it's a part of everything.
Exactly.
And both sets of grandparents, thanks be to God, were very involved in the church.
That's beautiful.
As my mom's dad, my grandpa Brian, used to make rosaries and would send them to Russia. This is, pre the fall communism. And just watching that and, knowing that that's an important thing. Here's my grandpa I look up to. What's he do with his free time? He makes rosaries. Now, he'd be sitting there making them while watching the Cardinals on TV and or the stock market.
Isn't that beautiful?
But it was just, like I said, part of the culture, part of everything around us all the time.
And Father, wouldn't it be true to say that because it was part of the culture, part of the family, part of the air you breathed, wouldn't it be true to also say you are open to the priesthood because of that reason? And so some people will say, how did you ever know you wanted to be a priest, as you mentioned, when you were so young? Or same thing with me. And I say, because my family showed me the beauty of both.
Yes.
They lived their love of the priesthood, of the church, of religious life. And being around that enables us to be able to respond to that grace, which is there from baptism on.
Absolutely.
To say, I think this is probably me. Now, Father, did that desire for priesthood always remain firm in your heart?
Firm? No, not really. So there at the end of high school, that was a really nice segue back in. I'm really impressed. That was wonderful. When I was in high school, towards the end, my best friend and I visited a couple of seminaries. And, I loved the idea of becoming a priest. The seminary scared the heck out of me.
Wow.
I just, as a 17, 18-year-old, I wasn't ready for getting up at 6:30 in the
Is
morning.
that the thing that most frightened you?
No, not completely. But obviously, I know, and it sounds ridiculous now. But like the getting up, the curfew. I never had a curfew growing up. I mean,
Are you referring to some discipline procedures?
Like the funny thing is, like my folks, it's not like we just roamed free.
Sure.
But it's just like we knew what the limits were. I remember one time
Yes.
I was at a friend's house watching a movie on like a Saturday night and fell asleep. And I came home at like 2:30 in the morning.
Wow.
I know. And I peeked into my parents' room and my dad just said, "Never again." Didn't stay out that late again. Thanks be to God. That was like, but and so, I mean, I wasn't out like painting the town red. I mean, it was just,
Right.
but so it was one of those things where to go from that environment into what just, I mean, like I said, as an 18-year-old, it just struck me as I just wasn't ready for that.
Sure.
And
a lot of boys aren't.
Sure.
Some of you girls might be.
We've had these conversations before. It's been
many,
really good.
many times. Guys take a little bit longer, and that's fine because that's the way God made them.
And this best friend
So
and
what distracted you?
Well, various things. Best friend and I ended up being roommates in college, went to St. Louis University. And I lived a pretty normal college life. I still went to Mass every Sunday. There was one Sunday in college I didn't go to Mass on a Sunday. I felt so guilty. I went to confession and Mass on Monday. So that was my period of like wandering from the church. Luckily, it only lasted for like 12 hours. But it just, the faith was still there and a part of it. But I was in a fraternity. I worked for Anheuser-Busch for 3 years, which was great. I was a tour guide at the brewery and got to be with the Clydesdales and all that was great. I had a girlfriend for about a year. I mean, just all sorts of good things, but the kind of, pull towards the priesthood never went away. And I majored in, I should probably mention what I studied. I majored in political science and communication. Because as I like to say, it's like, well, I'm not going to be a priest. What should I be? I guess a politician.
Oh my goodness.
So I, studied political science. And I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the study of communication. Met one of my favorite professors of all time, Dr. Avis Meyer, who ran the University News, the St. Louis University newspaper. And one of the most challenging professors I've ever had. And probably the one that I keep most in contact with. Isn't it funny that's the ones who challenge us and push us the most?
Because they see more in us than we see in ourselves.
And he was the type too. His grading scale, if you got a C, that's average. That's what you get. You had to impress his socks off to get a B. And I think he gave out like an A a year. And I got a B.
You didn't receive it?
I got a B+ in one of his classes.
You almost were there.
And I did get an A in another one. But you have to like just, but he was such a good man. Just those kind of interactions, it was so good. But as I got towards the end of college and was looking at, different options, I will say I was blessed from a couple of priests kind of giving me the kick that I needed.
Oh, good.
One was a priest back in the Diocese of Peoria, Monsignor Mark Murdian, who, when I said what my different plans are, he just said, "Oh, John, you're made for so much more." And like was straight. And then there's another priest who, when he found out that I was looking at a master's degree in political communication, and he asked me, he goes, "What about the seminary?" And I said, "Well, I'm still kind of thinking about the seminary, but I think I'm going to get this master's first." And he, in his big booming voice,
Good
said,
for him.
Yeah, he goes, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." I'm not going to yell because there's a microphone right above my head. But he said, either you go to seminary or you don't. He goes,
And did that pierce you to the heart?
Oh, completely. Yeah. It was so good. And I made the decision to go into seminary right out of college. The summer in between was probably one of the hardest of my life. So this was 2004. The whole abuse scandal had just hit in 2002, which, that's not what made it hard in and of itself. On a certain level, I mean, the requirements to get in got harder. We had all the psychological examinations. You had a lot of interviews. And I mean, in some ways, though, it's like we respond to that. We want the challenge.
Yes.
It's like, put it this way. It's like, what do you value more? It's like, okay, the A from Dr. Meyer or the, very important customer card from the grocery store. Well, everybody's a very important customer. You don't care about that. But the A from a teacher you had to really work hard for. It's like, it's like we're calling a few good men. It's like you want to respond to that. And, so some of us stepped up and we did, and it was good and it was challenging.
Father, I'm so glad you brought that up because recently I was visiting a seminary. Well, this has happened on several occasions. And when anything comes up about the priest abuse scandal and all the above, their entire response is, with God's grace, to number one, they've got that straight because they certainly can't by themselves. So with God's grace, we're going to turn it around. And I love that hero inside each of us that wants to respond to the current present-day challenge. That screw tape, and the listeners are used to me referring to the devil as screw tape and C.S. Lewis's screw tape letters. That screw tape is always trying to find our weak point in any time and say, see, therefore you are not that good. And you really can't do it. And you have these problems, etc. And that's where young people are starving for someone they respect and believe in to see the goodness in them and to help bring that forward. And so your response as a seminarian, and you were at the cusp of the breaking of what we still are afflicted with, and that's part of the purification that we need.
Absolutely.
But people will respond to that with such a beautiful magnanimity of heart.
And thanks for saying magnanimity, too. That's my favorite virtue that's represented in the virtue program. I love it so much. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. And yeah, I mean, do we get looked askance at in public sometimes? Yeah, we do. But, you know, you're doing it on behalf of Christ and his church, so be it. But I will say, it's just that summer was interesting. So I was working in a mailroom at a big facility, I was in Peoria, I was in a Caterpillar facility outside of Peoria.
Oh, okay.
And and the reason I bring this up is it just kind of, I think, symbolizes like what had changed that summer. Because here I am, 22-year-old kid, just graduated from St. Louis University, and I'm working in a mailroom for the summer, and I wasn't real excited about it. And this guy, and I'll never forget this, he goes, are you the one who's going to go be a priest? And I said, yeah. And he goes, what, do you like little boys or something? And I remember it was one of those things where it hits you, but this recognition of this is the reality now.
Yeah.
And, you know, and on a certain level, it's like, okay, we shouldn't be patted on the back by everybody because, well, this is what God is calling you to do. It's a gift.
You said this morning at breakfast, when you were saying that priests today are either put on a pedestal,
treated like princes,
yes,
or
spat upon.
Yeah, exactly.
Will you just kind of say that from a priestly standpoint? Because I just think it's good for us to realize.
Absolutely, it's like I think all of our vocations should be honored. We're all in this together.
Yes.
It's a universal call to holiness, and it's like. It's what St. Thomas Aquinas talks about, and I'm not going to say it as well as a Dominican would. It's like the virtuous mean, essentially, right? It's like, no, we shouldn't be treated like princes, but we shouldn't all be treated like perverts. Like, we're priests. Like, we're called to follow our Lord, to love him with all of our hearts, to lay down our life and imitate the Good Shepherd, and do whatever we can in that. And part of imitating the Good Shepherd means we're going to get treated like him. I mean, there's Palm Sunday. And then there's the Passion. I mean,
all in 1 week.
And all in one day sometimes. All in one trip to the airport. I mean, it's amazing how that, and I'm sure you experience some of the same thing, where it's like either, all of you nuns carry rulers and are going to beat me up, or, it's you can do no wrong.
Yeah,
and the thing is, we are human beings, but, it's like Fulton Sheen.
That's what makes us so lovable.
I know.
I mean, my gosh.
It's like treasure in clay. That's what I was looking for.
Any promise of fidelity.
Yes, exactly.
That you're taking weak people and that they're stepping up to the plate by God's grace, with faith in God's grace.
Absolutely. And he's always involved.
Will be faithful.
Yeah. If it was just us, it would all fall apart. Exactly. I mean, think about what's going on now. I mean, if it was just us, this would have all fallen apart a long time ago. It's interesting. It was just in the gospel. Was it just yesterday or Wednesday, I think, or just a couple days ago? We're early on in Advent right now. But, anytime like Jesus feeds the multitudes, he always gives the food to the disciples to disperse it. Yeah. Like he always involves, he didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. He's the Son of God. He could have just as easily done it however he wanted, but he always, or even when like the man blind on the side of the road is calling out to him, people tell him to be quiet. Then when Jesus says, bring him to me, like he still works through, these intermediaries to go get him. even though we time and again mess it up. I mean, look at Simon Peter. Denied him 3 times, but Jesus gives him the chance to 3 times declare his love. And then what does Jesus say? Once again, feed my sheep. I mean, it's always about, okay, you're in love with me, good. Now turn around and share it with everybody else.
Beautiful,
I mean, it's incredible, A, that we get to be a part of it, but to sort of throw it back in Screw Tape's face,
Yes,
it's like,
exactly.
well, okay, yeah, no, I'm not worthy, but he loves me, and, he's enough for me, and so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep going to confession, and just keep getting the help along the way.
Now, Father, to begin to sum this up, because we have a part 2 coming as well, so audience, yes, you can get
We've only been talking for like
excited.
2 minutes, I think, right?
I do believe we are not conscious of time when we are talking. But Father, okay, your parents' reaction to your priestly vocation.
Thanks be to God, I have wonderful parents.
You do.
My mom, I'll put it this way, neither my mom or dad was ever pushy or anything like that at all, ever.
Yes.
My grandma went, not pushy, pushy is not fair, but 2 things are funny. So when I had that girlfriend in college, my grandma was not excited. So she said something about, well, I'm going to stop praying that novena or something like that.
Did
she was pretty disappointed. But obviously we know the way things worked out. And when I did enter seminary, and guys who are in the seminary, priests are going to understand why this is kind of crazy. So I'm like a month into the seminary, and my aunt and uncle were going to Rome. My grandma had my aunt buy a chalice for me. Now, when you're which is beautiful, but when you're like a month in, that's kind of a big no-no to already have your chalice when you're brand new in the seminary.
Not for your grandmother.
I know.
No, so
thank you, Grandma. So we let that stay at the house. But I love it. Every time I use it, I think of her. It's so good.
Beautiful?
But Mom and Dad, they were super supportive in me going to these, the vocation discernment camps growing up. But it was never sort of the style of, well, this is what we expect of you. When I went to college, they were happy and supportive. And my dad never really talked about it at all until I made the decision to enter. And then he just, that's what you do. And this is great. We're behind you 100%.
That fits your father, doesn't it?
Completely. It's just, what I was going to be, and then it was fine. And thanks be to God, too, my siblings have been great, too. I think the only thing that can be kind of tough, just to be fair, is, we do have to detach a bit and be attached to our parish as a diocesan priest.
Yes.
So Thanksgiving was in the recent past as we're recording this, and the entire extended family on the Eckert side was together. I was with my parish family, which was a good thing. I didn't plan to go to Illinois and be with the family because I had 3 funerals that week. And I even said to my mom on the phone, it's like, I am where I'm supposed to be. And it's good. It's a good thing. I get to spend time with them, but at the same time, I think they understand, and more as time goes by, that, I've given my life to the church. My family is the parish. They're still a part of my life. I love them very much. And, I can't imagine an uncle loving his niece and nephews more than I do. It's just,
I have
they're
seen
so
you
good.
with them. I can't imagine it either. Now, Father, we'll get into what it's like to be a priest.
That sounds good.
What in seminary? And this will be the final question.
Okay.
So for all the young men who are thinking about this, or the parents who have their sons studying in the seminary, whose sons are studying in the seminary, for you personally, I get asked this question all the time, so it's just very easy for me to ask others. What was your hardest part of the seminary, or the greatest challenge to you that you can share with us? And then what was the part that you knew that this really was the divine plan and you would do this? You would say your yes to God.
It's a good question. I think the hardest part, frankly, was probably just the very first year.
Okay.
In making the transition from St. Louis University,
yes.
It's 12,000 co-ed undergrad.
Oh, St. Louis University.
I was super involved. I was a very happy Billiken, I was involved. I loved it. Had some amazing friends. We did all sorts of stuff. And I 2 times my first year, I remember, one was that first Friday night when I remember, it's like I know that there are things going on with friends and that back.
The Friday night call.
And, oh my God, and here I am in this seminary room alone. And it was just, and I didn't know the other guys yet. Like we hadn't formed the bonds.
Right.
And it just, it was a death to self, and you're detaching. And then the other time I remember, and once again, it's so funny how time is relative. But like I'm in this, 8:30 a.m. morning class, which now that's like noon the way it feels. But I know, but at the time I know.
Father, we've run around the world several times.
I know. But like first class of the day, 8:30, and it was logic. And it was just not exciting to me. And I'm just sitting there like looking at these other guys like, what in the world am I doing? It was just, because I wasn't there, but like anything, anytime we're following our Lord, he tells us all over the place in the Gospels, if you're going to be my disciple, if you got to deny yourself, take up your cross, here's probably the hardest word in the whole Gospel, daily, and follow me. Yeah. There is a real death to self. And one of my priest brothers in the diocese said, just in reflecting on his time in the priesthood, and he said, it's kind of hard to articulate, but what's one of the surprises of the priesthood? What do you have to learn about? Suffering. I mean, you do have to suffer.
Yes.
And you go through that death to self. But the beautiful thing about our faith is, we know there's suffering, but then the resurrection comes. Exactly. I mean, yes, okay, at the time, to be up, alert, ready to go in the chapel by 6:30, I mean, gosh, it was such a difficult thing. Now, I mean, my alarm went off this morning at 4:45, and I'm fine. It's not big deal. It's just funny.
The graces are there now.
The graces, and it is. And grace builds on nature. Yeah. And it's like exercising. I mean, something that was so hard in the beginning is part of your like warm up routine now. It's funny how that happens. But God is so good and is preparing us for more and more all the time. Something that, may seem like Mount Everest at the beginning, but he gets you there by his grace. It's possible, and that's why we have to be in perpetual contact with him.
His grace. Father, we really want to thank you. Didn't I tell you, audience, that Father John Eckert is very, very special and that you would absolutely love this? And since we all have, Father, and you have kindly agreed,
of course,
stay tuned for part 2. God bless.